Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to, and if I have to do it later, tell me when. I'd like to make a motion to add an item to the agenda.
You could do it later. You'll
Okay,
have opportunities.
Okay, just let me know.
Many opportunities.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Elections do have consequences, as several presidents have told us. We're witnessing that in Technicolor, stereo, and high volume at the national level. I mentioned last month the information on our village website to help village residents find help if they've lost their jobs, are experiencing high anxiety, stress, and other behavioral and physical disorders, or personal family and business disruptions due to Trump executive orders and Musk DOGE directives. Many of us are working to maintain our own lives under these threats and helping others with their lives. Elections have consequences at the local level, too. The results of the village of Friendship Heights' last election in May of '23 certainly had consequences. 4 new council members were elected. Many current council members, including me, did not expect to be officers of the village, but here we are. After the election, alliances shifted fundamentally as new friendships and working relationships developed. Some of us became better acquainted with others, taking the time to get to know each other. Other relationships dissolved with the challenges of elected office. Some of us developed productive relationships with village staff as we learned from the inside more about the village and its staff. Village staff have certainly felt that change for better and worse. You can ask them. But it's too easy to get lost in the fog of day-to-day and month-to-month meetings, complaints, disappointments, and disagreements. Elections can yield positive change, too. In this last meeting, before the village election season begins in earnest, and assertions of personal attribution in public or private prevail, here are some of the positive changes that have taken place in the village since 2023 council election as a result of the collective action of council, the focused work of council members and staff, and of staff. Before I conclude, I'll encourage others to run for office this May so that they help make a difference too. First, the positive changes in the village as an organization and to the life of village residents. Page Park is moving ahead slowly. By necessity, Page Park has received untoward, constant, and necessary attention. A wag once opined about Ginger Rogers dancing with Fred Astaire that she did everything he did, but she did it backwards and in high heels. The council has had to dance backwards over the past 2 years after park construction to obtain a permit for the 2-dimensional aspects of the park. That is, the idea and written plans that were not unfortunately obtained before construction began. Now we're into the 3-dimensional review process. One more complicated because no inspections were done as construction began while it was underway and before the contractor declared construction done. As I've said many times in meetings and in private conversations, we all wish different steps had been taken as planning and subsequent construction began 3 years ago, but we are making slow progress. And we've learned, as a result, we think, to take first steps first, to dance forward and not to make the same steps with Red House planning and construction. Our progress is in compliance with the law and regulations, and truth be told, the timelines are not significantly different from other construction projects in our neighborhoods if one considers their progress from idea to completion, which often takes multiple years. It is, after all, our responsibility to obtain the reviews and approvals necessary to assure safe, accessible, and environmentally sensitive public spaces, as painful as that process can be. Slow and steady progress continues on both projects. But there is much more. We have a new shuttle van route which affords better access to the van at all village buildings. We'll shortly have a new, shorter, and better van at a lower cost. Public safety has been improved. Lighting is bright, finally, in the Metro Rotunda and on Wisconsin Avenue. Every village building has received a review by the Montgomery County Police of exterior safety issues. Training about safety in high-rise buildings has been presented at the county center by county staff, at the village center by county staff. The new county drone will reach the village to assure faster and appropriate response. Cameras are installed on Wisconsin Avenue to help apprehend bad actors. The village receives increased attention from the Montgomery County Police Department because of relationships developed over the past 2 years. We've added speed bumps and repainted striping on village streets. We've had regular engagement with village businesses and with organizations representing businesses to share and hear perspectives. We are on the map of county police and local businesses, so to speak. We figured out a way to decrease mosquito populations in the village during summer months. The Pink House sidewalk on Willard Avenue is now regularly cleared of debris throughout the year. Dead trees and shrubs have been removed in Willoughby and Humphrey parks. A household battery recycling program began. We've recognized the need for capital improvements reserve with appropriate flexibility for that reserve to be used for other purposes if needed. New accounting software has been introduced. Contracts and other documents now regularly receive an attorney's review before council consideration. We've regularly brought ourselves to the attention of county planners who will be engaging us and others in the rewriting of the Friendship Heights sector plan. We have placed ourselves squarely in the county planning department's focus for the upcoming sector plan process. We created 2 new ad hoc committees, one on development, one on climate change and environment, to focus village attention on these important issues and to learn more from and about residents. A new initiatives program was introduced to solicit the ideas of village residents and encourage them to work more closely with village staff. And there's more. We appointed a wonderful new member to the village council following the unexpected death of Paula Durbin. Several council members established office hours to provide a scheduled opportunity to meet with village residents. Village staff have developed innovative ways to engage and communicate with village residents. Internal village operations, something typically invisible to residents, have our staff working more efficiently and collaboratively. Continuing education for village staff has improved. A first quality of life survey was conducted to better understand the thoughts and priorities of village residents. Results from the survey were used in village decision-making processes. Trash cans were added and strategically placed on village streets. Regular pickups by Goodwill have been added to the list of scheduled village amenities. We contracted for a professional salary review to better benchmark staff salary and benefits and to establish a standardized process going forward. New policies have established expectations for better process and practice, and we're working on others. And there is more to tell. These improvements in village practice and life have not come without challenges. The challenges have been interpersonal, sometimes of the in-your-face ilk. We've had process and practice challenges as we've learned to work with committees and to focus council's limited time on council business, while still affording many opportunities for residents to speak with us. New and surprising coalitions formed within the council as council members began to work or not work with one another. Some differences of opinion and promise fulfillment have sparked point-counterpoint at village meetings, but this is to be expected among a group of 7 people, each with his or her own priorities and personality. Truth be told, it has gotten out of hand on several occasions. This takes me to my second point. It's election season. Run for office. March's newsletter announces the May 12th, 2025 election and the upcoming deadlines, paperwork, and requirements for candidates to file for the May election to the Village of Friendship Heights Council. One must be a village resident at the time of nomination and on May 12th, 2025, Election Day. One must be a registered voter with the Board of Elections Supervisors of Montgomery County, Maryland, as of April 28th, 2025. April 4th, 5 p.m. is the deadline to submit a petition signed by 10 registered Friendship Heights voters. The League of Women Voters will conduct the election. Vote in person on May 12th. Vote by mail-in or with absentee ballot. For those latter options, visit the village website, visit, call, or send a request for that ballot to the village center, complete and return the necessary form. If the league determines you're eligible to vote in the election, you'll be mailed a ballot. Please follow the instructions carefully and drop your ballot in the drop box outside the village center or mail it to the league. Any ballot received after 8 p.m. on May 12, 2025 will not be counted. If you ask ahead of time, an election official can pick up your ballot on May 12th. If you plan to run, be prepared for a multi-hour public meeting at which a representative from the League of Women Voters will ask candidates questions on many topics. It's typically the best attended meeting of the year. I'm happy to share my experience as a council member to help those considering a run understand more about the village, the time commitments I've discovered, and to explore your expectations. I've learned a lot about people and process the past 2 years, and I'm sure other council members are eager to do the same if you have questions. The village, as I learned while campaigning 2 years ago, and as I noted in my earliest comments as chairman, is filled with extraordinary people, with extraordinary professional and personal experience. That observation has only been reinforced over time as I've had the opportunity to work with many more people. Discovering you is a highlight of the job. Elections have consequences, as I mentioned at the start of my comments. So be a part of the decision-making body tasked with village leadership. Run to create choice. There is still considerably more to do. Continuing oversight of village staff and practice, because much is accomplished and maintained on a daily and annual basis. And staff perform well under sometimes extraordinary challenging circumstances. On the remaining list of things to do, perhaps for a next council, we do need additional bylaws changes. Changes are long overdue. Charters for all our committees are needed so council, committee chairs, and council members better understand their responsibilities. Some folks may want to reconsider the village status as a special taxing district. And then, as we've discovered this year, there will always be surprises. So step up and be the change you want to see. Elections can have positive consequences. For tonight's agenda, note several changes. We will not be discussing the speed and radar signage. A proposed investment policy is also not ready for prime time. I don't believe that the lease for the Red House is ready either, so we won't be talking about that. We'll look forward to these for the April agenda. A request to include an action taken at the last Finance Committee is not on tonight's agenda. In conversation with another member of the Finance Committee, this item was meant to be part of the referral from the committee for the April meeting, assuming the Finance Committee concludes its work on the fiscal year 2026 budget week after next. And the village manager will explain the item on tonight's agenda regarding the recommendation of the village property tax for 2026 when that item arises on the agenda. That recommendation will be voted on at April's meeting after a public hearing. And finally, 2 notes of interest following Geico's announcement 2 weeks ago. Tara Margulies, the lead staff person for the Planning Department's redo of the sector plan, will join us for the next Development Committee meeting on March 27th to help us understand the best timing to receive recommendations from the village, as well as other useful information as preparation for the sector plan marathon goes forward. The 2-year race has just begun. And if you haven't heard, the rental apartments in Mazza Galleria are expected to open late summer, just a few months, with Total Wine and More and TJ Maxx opening in that space. So on to the village manager's report.
Excuse me,
Manager
Chairman.
Mansfield?
Would you mind repeating which agenda items are off?
I would be happy to do that. Thank you. The signage, radar and speed signage is off. The investment policy is off, and the lease for the Red House is off the agenda.
Could I,
Yes.
just one observation about the Red House lease. So we are, I think, surprised and a little disappointed that we don't have it for discussion today, but I'd just like to let the council know that we're optimistic we will have it shortly, which I think you may ask for a special meeting in order to resolve that issue and move the conversation forward. So I apologize if we don't have it today, but I think it may be before the next monthly meeting that we bring that issue to the council.
Yeah, I think no apologies necessary. It takes time to get these things done, and there are two parties working on it for sure. Yes.
Yeah, so since we are setting the agenda, and you referenced an item I've asked several times to add. If we need the council to vote on it, that's fine, but I want to add an item which was referred to the council from the Finance Committee. It was not meant for it to be part of the budget. It's independent of the budget. It's something we voted on several times, independent of the budget, and that is the unanimous recommendation of the Finance Committee to make an additional deposit into the capital account. So we can vote on it, but
I think if you talk with the other member, and I'm happy to have him speak on this issue of the Finance Committee, there's no doubt that a vote was taken, but this is part of the budget that is coming forward next
Well-
month, and that was the intent of that vote at the time.
That-
I don't know, Councilman Measy, would you like to speak to this issue?
I think perhaps because there's some concern about this, let's put it on the agenda for discussion. We shouldn't discuss it at this point. So I would support the idea of putting it on the agenda.
Okay. Is there further discussion? All those in favor of placing it on the, would anybody,
Is this going to be a vote?
does anybody want to vote, or everybody's comfortable putting it on? Let's just put it on the agenda, and we
Okay.
can put it on at the end of the meeting. Village Manager Mansfield?
Thank you. Two items that I've been getting a lot of questions about that I wanted to update everybody on. One is the utility work at 5500 Wisconsin in front of where the Donahoe project will be built. Pepco, we were able to get a hold of Pepco and find a contact person who could give us some information on what they're doing and how long it's going to take. So the latest information is it's supposed to be completed by March 21st, so that's late next week. They are undergrounding the utilities, and then they're going to be removing the overhead lines in front of the building. So, and we do have a contact person. If there's any follow-up or questions anyone can ask me, we can try to get the answer. But basically, the work is nearing completion, and it should be done by late next week. Second item is resources for federal employees, former federal employees, and people who have been affected by everything that's going on with the federal government. We've added several resource links on our website at the request of some folks in the village. We were able to get some additional information from Montgomery County with a couple of resource links that were that looked pretty helpful. So we put those on the village website on the What's New page, so I would commend everybody to check that out if you're so inclined. Thank you.
Thank you, Village Manager Mansfield. Thank you. We have 3, 4, 5 people who wish to speak tonight. First is Lynn Well. Did I pronounce that? Mr. Well, did I pronounce your name?
Lynn Welly.
Welly. Okay, thanks.
It's a water well with a pronounced E at the end of the water well.
Okay, thank you.
Anyway, good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak at your Friendship Heights Village Council meeting tonight. My name is Lynn Welly, but I'm really here in disguise tonight as Don Quixote. Tonight, Don Quixote is tilting at Truist Bank. That's the windmill that he's tilting at tonight. specifically the Truist Bank in your municipality at the corner of Willard and Wisconsin Avenue. That is in your municipality. If anyone has an account at Truist Bank, I would like to hear from you and get your support in my plea. That is to have Truist Bank be more respectful toward their local community and to honor the location of the naming of the branches that they have around. They do have name identification for each of the branches that I've been to. On River Road, there's a branch they call Kenwood. That's correct. It is in Kenwood. In Bethesda at 7220 Wisconsin Avenue, there's a branch they call Bethesda Main Branch. That's reasonable. The branch here in Friendship Heights in your municipality at the corner of Willard and Wisconsin, they call McLean Gardens. Does anyone here not know where McLean Gardens is? Please raise your hand. All right, McLean Gardens is in Washington, D.C., over 2 miles south of here. That is, of course, in an entirely different government jurisdiction and a zip code that's quite different. I have no explanation. The McLean Gardens neighborhood at Newark in Wisconsin, it is more than I've already said that. So it seems that a bank that wants your business ought to be more accurate and respectful and honor the communities with names where its branches are located, actually located. If you'd like to help me persuade Truist Bank to name their branch here Friendship Heights and to not name it McLean Gardens, here's the address that you can write to. It's the Chief Executive Officer for Truist Financial. His name is William H. Rogers. The address is 214 North Tryon Street in Charlotte, North Carolina. I know there's huge, bigger issues going around today, and this is really small potatoes.
Mr. Welly?
But I think there's a simple fix. And if I can get some help, I'd appreciate it.
Mr. Welly?
Any questions?
No, Mr. Welly,
I'm over time.
you're over time, and I'd like to thank you for your comments.
All right,
And
thank you.
I'll call the next speaker. Thank you.
If anyone wants to contact me, Brian knows how to reach me.
Thanks. Now, Lynn and Chris Cowan? Yes. Do you want to speak or just, okay, thanks. Al Muller?
Good evening, Village Council. My name is Al Muller, residing at 4601 North Park Avenue. As usual, I will start with something positive concerning a financial update. At the end of February, the village's total cash on hand in all its accounts had increased to $3.7 million, which includes $903,000 in the capital improvements account. An additional $1 million is still expected on May 3rd from sale of the Village Red House air rights. A total of $4.7 million. $4.7 million. A thank you to the Finance Committee, which met last week and agreed to make clear in next year's budget report, as I have repeatedly suggested, that the village essentially has two budgets. The capital improvements budget, which is expected to spend almost $400,000 this next year, mainly on completing Page Park and making the Red House ready for occupancy, leaving at least $300,000 as a surplus in that account, not a deficit. And in addition, that does not require any money, which has been brought up apparently for a new addition to this agenda, to put any more money in there. There will be $300,000. You can take that $1 million at any time you want and put it anywhere you want. The second is the operating budget, which you will have presented, and that is used for the daily maintenance of the center, the streets, the parks, our salaries, and that is presently showing a surplus of $290,000 in expected revenues. The two budgets that I've mentioned will both be balanced at the end of this year, as the Finance Committee correctly showed, with no deficits in either budget. Therefore, we will have the lowest tax rate allowable by law, all of these amenities, and no tax increase. Village residents should be very proud, even bragging, that our financial status is something the county, the state, and certainly our federal government has not achieved. A balanced budget with numerous amenities. With all this good news, I hope the council, or the next council, will recognize and rectify their oversight in not granting an additional $25,000 total for village staff raises, as recommended by the professional contracted study completed last year, which ironically itself cost $25,000. You know how badly the chair has indicated our federal staff is currently being treated, and we are powerless to help. But our hardworking, bright, and loyal village staff deserve better treatment than the federal staff is receiving. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ken Niles?
Ken Niles, 5500 Friendship Boulevard, Willoughby. Mr. Chairman and council members, and by the way, thank you for your comments about GEICO and the upcoming development committee. That leads right into my comments. At this moment, in the early stages of our sector plan development, we have learned that GEICO is moving from our village. I believe this presents a unique opportunity for our village to capitalize on this major event. I'm here today to ask this council to accept the Community Advisory Committee's proposal for the new sector plan that was presented to the council earlier this year. Some might argue that the CAC document should be presented to our village in open forum for wider acceptance. But for now, I suggest this council move ahead with the plan as the basic template for the development we'd like to see. The county is certainly moving apace. Let's make sure we're with them. The CAC proposal offers a well fleshed out plan for the future development of our village. As you all know, this proposal is heavily dependent on redevelopment of the GEICO property, with some key components of the plan: a community performing arts, culture, and library center, play and park space areas, and a dog park, all situated on the GEICO property. I believe this proposal falls well within the scope of the planning process as presented last month by Otero Margolis to the Montgomery County Planning Department, where she calls for more community amenities and places for gathering. And most notably, interest in redevelopment of the GEICO property as a significant part of the Friendship Heights sector plan. As part of the upcoming Friendship Heights Development Committee meeting this March 27th, where Otero will be presenting ongoing developments in the sector plan, I asked that this council present the CAC document to Ms. Margolis, at the very least, as an opening gambit, particularly as our village has such a big stake in redevelopment of the GEICO property, a development that is so very integral to the Friendship Heights sector plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Evan Smith.
I'm Evan Smith, Willard Towers. The Village Council has received, as Ken was mentioning, the sector proposal from the Community Advisory Committee. One of the most important parts of it is having a library and art center located on the Geico property. We're aware, of course, that the Geico announcement that it's moving to Bethesda, and that the current property will be disposed of. The Geico building is a classic of the international style by a renowned architect. There will undoubtedly be pressure to preserve some or all of the building as a landmark. What better way to preserve it than as a library and an art center? I urge the Village Council and the community to pursue that goal and consequently make the Geico building a part of the community as a library and art center. Thank you.
Thank you. That takes us to comments from the council. Are there any comments from? Yes. Number 7.
We all know there are many federal employees, retirees, et cetera, in our neighborhood, and I want to make sure people are aware that amongst much of the bad news that is out there, there's a very important piece of information, and that is there are talks underway as part of the continuing resolution to dramatically change the federal employees' health benefits plan. That would affect current employees, it would affect retirees, and it would affect survivors. So, I mean, I can share information after the meeting, but I would urge anyone on the federal health benefits plan to contact their member of Congress, who's Jamie Raskin, and both of our 2 Maryland senators. Thank you.
Any other comments? Yes.
I wanted to reinforce the chairman's plea that people put themselves forward for election to the council. And my concern has to do with the upcoming sector plan that so many people have already addressed. This is a very important window. And the council does, I've been on the council for 6 years, and we do something interesting, perhaps something not interesting. Every year things happen. But this is going to be crucially important for the future of Friendship Heights. And this council, the village council, although there will be opportunities for citizens to make comments and have input, village council will be the only formal body that will be standing up at these meetings and presenting concerns of the Friendship Heights Village. It's important that that we have a strong council. We have a strong council now. There'll be at least 2 vacancies on the council. It's important that we have people on the council who are willing to commit the time to actually be a part of this of the sector plan process, which obviously will affect very heavily what Geico does, but also other areas around the village also. There's an old saw that said that you're either at the table or you're on the menu. I think it's important to be at the table rather than being on the menu.
Any other comments? Yes.
Yes, I'd like to say thank you for the comments that you made in the beginning, because I don't think a lot of people really understand the amount of work that is done when you become a member of the council. It's very time-consuming, but it's something that you give back to your community because you want to, and you work hard at it. And there are a lot of things, as Councilman Pestrunk said, there are a lot of projects, there are a lot of things that come up. And I would only say, going forward, please vote and please run. We need more creative minds, we need new ideas, we need different viewpoints, and we need people to work together. When things are referred to committees to discuss, I ask that going forward that the people who have ideas, the people who want something discussed, please present what it is you want discussed, because people take their time out of their schedule to come and discuss those topics. If you don't give us anything, then it's fruitless. And I apologize to people who come to meetings and then there's the topic we were supposed to discuss. There's no information for us to do it. This is time consuming, and don't let anybody tell you it's not. It is time consuming, but it can be fun. It can be enjoyable. But just please try and be a part of this community. Thank you.
Seeing no other comments from the council, Mayor White.
Thank you. Following last month's announcement about the removal of Ride-On Bus Route 34 from Friendship Heights, a representative from the County Department of Transportation has informed us that bus service will still exist between Friendship Heights and Bethesda. A new Metro bus route called D96 will connect Bethesda and Friendship Heights via Wisconsin Avenue, then will continue south into DC via Western Avenue and Massachusetts Avenue Northwest. The new D96 service will begin on June 29th, the same day the changes to Route 34 take effect. Goodwill will once again host a donation drive collection this Saturday, March 15th, between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. The truck will park on Friendship Boulevard outside the village center. Please donate your gently used clothing, housewares, computers and electronics, toys and books, furniture, and small appliances.
Thank you, Mayor White. Move on to approval of the minutes. Secretary.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the minutes of the February 10th council meeting.
Has everybody seen the changes
Julian
to the minutes?
told me he emailed them out,
Okay.
but
Is that with the poll line?
and is that Mayor White? Did you second this? Or okay,
Okay.
thank you.
So it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the council for February 10th. Moved by Councilmember Solt, supported by Councilmember White. Is there any discussion?
I'll just note, I don't have any issue with it going forward, but I unfortunately haven't had the opportunity to look at the edits.
Would you like, I mean, we can.
I'm perfectly fine abstaining and letting this go forward. I've got confidence in the work. I just
Okay.
hadn't seen it.
Councilmember Tyler? Okay. There's a motion on the floor. It's been moved and supported to approve the minutes for February 10th council meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. All those abstaining? 2 abstentions. Call the roll.
I do want to make a roll call because I want to make sure I've got it right, but also, as I do at other meetings, if people could speak into the microphone, the transcripts have not been picking up or recording the full scope of our meeting. So, Mr. R?
Abstain.
Yep, R abstain. Mr. Measy?
Yes.
Mr. Measy, 4. Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer, 4. Solt, 4. Tyler
Abstain.
abstain. Mayor White?
Yes.
Mayor White, 4. Chairman Pestrunk?
Yes.
4. Thank you.
Let me do something that we typically do at the beginning of the meeting for those people who are watching live stream, to have us each introduce ourselves so that voices can be recognized. Councilmember Salt, would you like to start?
Martha Solt, I'm Secretary.
Roy, excuse me, Roy Schaefer, Treasurer.
Michael Misi.
Melanie White, Mayor.
Bobby Pestronk, Chairman.
Daniel R., Vice Chairman.
Thank you all. That takes us on to the Treasurer's report. Councilmember Schaefer.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This is a bigger crowd than we usually get, so thank you. I'm going to keep in the spirit of the cutting things from the agenda and try to keep this short. But let me start, as I often do, by correcting some misstatements. You can have $1 billion in the bank and be operating at a deficit. You can have no money in the bank and be operating at a surplus. They are very, very separate things. So when somebody says we can't have a deficit because we have money in the bank, that is objectively not a correct statement. Those things are not mutually exclusive. I hear every month that I don't give our cash balance out, and that's true. I don't need to, because before we get to the report, it's given out for me. And the suggestion that I'm somehow trying to hide it, it's just silly. And that information is available 24/7 on our website. And let me be clear, we do have a lot of money in the bank. I've never said we don't. At the same time, we are projecting a deficit for next year when you include capital expenses, and capital expenses we have never shown in the budgets we present to the public. This year is the first year we're going to do it because I pushed for it. What we're projecting is to spend about $300,000 more than we take in. That may change, it may go up, it may go down. We're also projecting, and again, these are estimates, for the following year, a 6-figure deficit. So what does that mean when you have a deficit and you have a lot of money in the bank? It means we don't have immediate concerns. It means we don't need to be thinking about a tax increase. We don't need to be thinking about cutting programs to save money. I've never said anything differently. But that's talking about the short term. When I talk about the concerns that I have, I am talking about longer term. That's the context. That's where I do have concerns. For example, I've mentioned before that our expenses have been going up for several years at a much higher rate than our revenue has gone up. Our projected income for next year is only 4% higher than our income was 3 years ago. 4%. Our expenses have gone up by much more than 4%. That's why the cash balance that was built up by having very, very large surpluses is declining, and we now have, at least for next year, deficits. That's the trend I'm concerned about. That's what I'm talking about. And I'll leave it at that because I will have more to say about it when I present the budget. So we had a Finance Committee meeting on February 27th. I'll talk about some of the things we voted on. Councilmember Solt presented including an item in our capital budget for charging stations. That's something that was approved in her Environmental Committee, and it was agreed to place it on today's council agenda. She'll be making a motion later on that. We discussed some various updates to the budget. We did not vote on the budget. We have 2 Finance Committee meetings set for later this month, the 19th and the 26th. Hoping we can get done on the 19th. If not, we'll certainly try to wrap up by March 26th. Those are open to the public, those meetings. They're 6 o'clock, I think, both of them? Okay.
4 o'clock on the 19th.
It's a good thing I asked. 4 o'clock. Okay.
6
Yeah.
or 6:30? 6:30?
I'm one of those federal employees, and we're dealing with a lot of work this week, anticipating a shutdown. So this hasn't been my number one focus. We had okay. I'm not going to go into the individual line item changes we made on the budget. We discussed Okay, in the draft budget, we had $75,000 per year. I had placed that in for capital security items. Councilmember Tyler was at that meeting and indicated she believed that that was unnecessarily high and recommended a lower amount. So we did have a vote to lower the capital security expense. And again, this is a projected expense. It's not a commitment to spend the money, to $20,000 per year. That motion was approved by a 2-to-1 vote. I was the one that voted no to leave it at $75,000. We discussed setting the village property tax rate for 2026. We voted 3-0 to recommend a rate of 4 cents per $100 of assessed property value. For next year's budget, that's our recommendation. We cannot vote on it today because I think it has to be noticed with a public hearing, but that is the committee's recommendation. We discussed the village investment policy. If you were here last month, you may remember that I proposed a new policy for the village to replace that 30-year-old policy. It was not a revision. It was a new policy. At the meeting, we had a 3-way tie. I voted yes. Chairman Pestrunk voted no. Councilmember Measy abstained. So we're going to try, moving forward, to reach a consensus and on some suggested changes to the budget I presented, to the policy I presented, and maybe we will be able to put something forward for our council vote. I do want to go back to there was another motion taken to add an additional $250,000 to the capital budget from the air right funds we received from Donahoe for the Red House air rights. The council has previously voted to allocate $250,000. This would be an additional $250,000. That motion passed 3-0. It is not a budget vote. It is not part of the budget. It is independent. You can pass the budget with or without this vote. You could pass this vote with or without a budget vote. I'd like to sort of get it out of the way since the council did unanimously recommend it.
Mr. Schaefer, you will have an opportunity to talk about that. The
Okay.
agenda item is on the agenda.
Okay, that's
tonight.
fine. And yeah, and next month we are, hopefully, we will prepare a budget for the next fiscal year, the year ending June 30th, 2026. Again, I'd like to ask the chair for permission to take questions. If not, then I'm done. Thank you.
Councilman Schaefer. Let me ask other council members who chair committees whether they would like to give a committee report. The council did agree that time at the village council meetings would not be used to present the details of committee meetings. So since that privilege was taken by the chair of the finance committee, I don't know whether there's anybody else who would like to present anything from their committees at this meeting. Okay, seeing none, let's,
Sir.
Yes.
Could I just comment on that? I think if something happens that's significant at a committee meeting, it's important to share that because the minutes from the committee meeting don't show up until quite a bit later. So I think it's kind of important if something important needs to be shared, I wouldn't say on a routine basis.
Yeah, I would repeat that the consensus of the council was that we wouldn't have committee reports and that people who are interested in the function and operations of the committee can attend the committee meetings if they're able. And I would further suggest, I'm not saying this is going to happen, at a subsequent meeting, action that was taken in a previous meeting could be voided and something else could be done based upon information that's presented at the meeting. So to use a meeting of the council to report on action that may not be final could potentially lead to misunderstandings among village residents. I understand your concern.
Yeah, I wasn't following what you were saying about this counseling, whatever. I'm just trying to say I support transparency and I don't necessarily agree with never saying anything about what happens at a committee meeting and that you have to go there in person. That's all I'm saying.
I think we all support transparency. Councilmember Salt. Yes, Councilmember Tyler.
I just wanted to make sure I understood what Councilmember Schaefer said. The 20,000 was for, you sound like you said for the years to come, and I want to make sure it was just for this draft budget.
No, I think it was in each year going forward, but again, it's not a requirement to spend it, it's just sort of in case, it just makes the funds
So the
available.
dollar amount is for each, but I didn't hear that for every other change.
I think that was in the presentation that that everyone who attended the meeting received. And again, these numbers aren't final.
That's not my question. My question is the dollar amount
It was
for-
it was in every year, yes.
Okay, but that is the only committee that has that statement attached to it for the changes that you said on every one. But I'll come to the budget meeting because that seems a little bit unfair that you're saying that particular committee only gets 20,000 every year, but the other committees where you put money into it, even though it's a draft, it's no attachment of every year.
I don't follow what you're saying. There's no commitment to a committee.
I'll come to the meeting.
All right, thank you.
Okay, moving on to old business, discussion on vote and recommendation from the Parks and Grounds Committee for signage in village parks. Councilmember Orr, I'll turn to you on this one. Thanks.
Sure, thank you. So the last couple of meetings in the Parks and Grounds meeting, we talked about with the hope that Page Park, the opening of Page Park is on the horizon. At least it's moving in a positive direction. We started talking about baseline expectations for behavior in Page Park, as well as sort of a broader conversation about the need and the mechanisms by which we might communicate similar expectations in other village parks. We had discussed some notional language. I had taken away, made a commitment to take away that language and think about what we might want to communicate and how we might communicate it. As I sat down to do that work, it occurred to me that a lot of the things that were assumed in the language of a potential sign or signs really were manifestations of policy that I wasn't sure that we as a council had come to an agreement on, some sort of fundamental things about the operation of our public spaces, things like hours of operation, expectations around the handling of animals or smoking, open containers, obviously bounded by the legal limitations imposed on us. A lot of this, it seemed to me to be expressions of preference for the village. And so I put together a list that I think you all have of what seemed to me to be the kind of major points for consideration before we get into a conversation about the language we might use to reflect to the community those expectations. I thought we might, we needed to have a conversation about some of those expectations. The ones that I thought were most likely to come up I've outlined here, and you all have my sort of initial preferences. I think I'd like to start the conversation by validating that kind of baseline assumption. I am interested in substantive reactions, but first kind of getting a general understanding of the perspectives on some of these policy questions, and whether everyone is in agreement that we need to come to some consensus on these positions, or whether instead this is more appropriate for a committee and those not on Parks and Grounds are happy or willing to delegate. I'm happy to go item by item, or if there's a sense of sort of general consensus about, assuming you've had the opportunity to digest some of this, reactions to that sort of underlying concept, I guess, as a starting point before we get into specific decisions.
Councilman Orr, do you think it would be helpful to validate the assumption that some signage is necessary and see whether there is a consensus on the
yeah, I think
council
that's-
about that, and
yeah.
then maybe move through the potential items that could be on signage, not exact language, but the areas?
Yeah, happy to do that. I will say that I think there are elements in here, whether our intent is presented on a sign or not, that we probably ought to come to some agreement on. So even if the consensus is we don't really need signs in our parks, that's fine. But I do think we might want to have a conversation about a few of these kind of overarching policy consideration. So
Okay.
I'll start by making a motion that in order to express to the community our expectations for behavior in, I'll start with Page Park, we should consider a specific sign that outlines do's and don'ts for behavior in Page Park.
Is there support for that motion?
I'd support it certainly, but why are you restricting it to Page Park? I thought this would be signage that would be for all three parks.
So it's a good point, and part of the reason I was starting with Page Park is you know, the kind of the largest, and it gives us a new opportunity. I think maybe our approach to some of the other parks might be different. The usage might be different. The risks might be different. But I'm happy to start with a general presumption that signage in our parks is appropriate, and then we can go from there. I'm happy to amend the motion to apply to all of our parks.
I'll second.
Okay, there's been a motion by Councilman R, supported by Councilman Mizzi to express the council's interest in signage for the parks. Is that?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
And having made the motion, I will just say, I think, you know, from my perspective, we've taken the time to name these parks. There's sort of history and sort of an associated story to the people that we are looking to honor by having named the parks. At a minimum, I think making the community aware of those names and the stories associated with them might be of value. Also, an identification of these spaces as village spaces to differentiate them from the spaces associated with the buildings or other aspects of the community might be of value. And then from there, we can go to a discussion about prohibitions or permissions.
So, yeah, we have
Well,
to.
Chairman, can I clarify
Well,
what
having
I've
made it,
got
I thought
here
there was room for
as the-
discussion.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm going to call on council members, as is the usual practice, so Councilmember Sol and Councilmember
No,
Schaefer.
what I mean is I'd like to clarify the motion that I have to
Okay.
verify we're talking about the same thing.
Right.
I have to express the council's interest in signage for the village's parks, which was sort of your second language. Is
Yep.
that appropriate?
That's fair. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And
So,
Councilmember, excuse me, Councilmember Mizzi.
That's right.
Okay.
So,
Yes, Councilmember Schaefer.
it sounds like maybe there's two motions we should break out. I support the idea of plaques and descriptions and honoring people. I thought what we were talking about was more of the rules. So those are separate things. So, can we break that into
I
two
think-
or one?
I think
big-
the motion that's on the floor is just to either agree or not agree that there should be signage for the parks, and then we can do a separate conversation about the details for the signage. And that's the motion that I heard. So let me see if there's any other discussion on the motion. Councilmember Sol?
I guess I'm a little old school. I'm really not a fan of signs unless there's an established need for the sign. I think in our parks, it really could detract from the beauty of the park to have potentially signs at every entrance. And I know other parks, the signs actually are a target for graffiti. So I would like to know that we really have a need for a sign rather than just say, oh, let's put a sign up there. In fact, without even knowing what we're trying to accomplish.
Councilmember Schaefer?
Yeah, so, again, I think this is, we should really break out signage giving instructions versus a historical plaque,
We're
which,
talking generally, there's a
So I would-
motion-
all right, so
there's a
I would-
motion on the floor. Please address the
so I
motion.
would make an amendment to limit this vote to only signage that gives park rules.
Is there support for that motion?
Could you say it again?
So I think that we're having two very separate discussions. So I would support, sure, you want to give a plaque and a description of who it's named at, that's great. A sign that says no skateboarding, I would oppose. So
So
I think it'd be easier if we broke them out. So my amendment is to
There-
limit the vote to
Is
only.
there support for the amendment?
So the amendment.
Everybody understand what the amendment
Yeah.
is?
The amendment is to limit the vote that we're taking only to a discussion on signs posting park rules.
I'm fine with that. That presumes that at least anyone who votes for that motion is comfortable with some sign, right? So, fine. What?
Yes, because if there was a separate motion on plaques, I would vote for that.
My assumption was that we were going to be discussing the rules.
Right.
The whole question of how we memorialize the names of the parks and what we do, that's really different and not quite as pressing as the list that you've assembled here, Dan.
Yep, that's perfectly fine, yeah.
So is there support for the motion? Councilman R., are you supporting Councilman Schaefer's?
I'm fine with that amendment to my motion, yeah.
Okay. Does everybody understand what that amendment does? No? Councilmember Sol?
I'll read the original motion and then the amendment to the motion.
Where's the motion amended?
The motion
I think the motion's been amended.
where the motion is clear that the motion was to approve signage for the parks. The amended motion
Is to,
is
excuse
to
me,
address the conditions and expectations for park use, I believe.
to
Is that
limit,
correct?
to limit the vote to discussion of signs, posting park rules is what I have. Is that correct?
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
So, any further discussion? Everybody understands the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign.
I'm sorry, again, opposed, against, yeah.
And
So,
would you like to call a roll?
sure, yeah. Mr. R.,
Yes.
or Mr. Measy,
Yes.
or Mr. Schaefer,
No.
against, Sold, against, Ms. Tyler,
Yes.
or Ms. White, or Mayor White,
Yes.
yes. Mr. Pestron,
Yes.
yes, thank you.
Councilmember Salt, you were no, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, thanks. Motion carries. Councilman R.?
Sure.
You want to proceed through the list?
Yeah,
then,
I'm happy to go through the items that I've identified. I also welcome, as I said in my email, other thoughts if there are other considerations. I think first and foremost, I guess I should say that despite my support for some signage, I do think, as a philosophical matter, I have an interest in minimizing the language, the specific prohibitions to only those things that I think are most important. I think I'm hesitant to make statements that we are not in a position to do something about. If we, to add prohibitions for which there aren't consequences or for which we're not prepared to engage in whatever the remedy is. I also am concerned about putting residents in a position of adjudicating other residents' behavior. So I'm inclined to focus on the small number of specific behaviors, at least with respect to signage, that we, A, care most about, and B, are most likely to encourage the behavior we're looking to incentivize. One of the items that we've seen on a lot of the signs that we've used as examples is a designation of operating hours or some other indication that the park is at some point open and at some other point closed. I know that the notional language that we were asked to take a look at, I think had a sunrise to sunset expectation for access to the park. And I think that seems as a starting point to be a pretty important determination. Do we intend to take a position that the park will close at some point, that residents will not have access to the open space? And if so, what's a reasonable closing time? I'll note the examples that presented sunrise to sunset. Last month, I think the average time of sunset was something like 5:15. For those of us returning to the office, we would miss entire, months of access to the park if we were to close it at sunset. And so I guess my recommendation at this point, the proposal that I outlined in the email was to remain silent on operating hours and to rely on have faith in the community, to be respectful of their neighbors to the extent that closing hours are an attempt to limit after-hours noise and other disturbances and distractions to the surrounding buildings, to rely on the existing mechanisms for nuisance and noise violations, and instead not take a position on a formal closing of the park. So I guess that's me.
I agree with that, and, you know, again, I'm looking at this from the perspective of all of our parks, and you know, closing Humphrey Park, for example, which is a thoroughfare which people walk through at various times of it's you can't do that. You know, Page Park might be a little bit different, but I think we can't really, obviously what we're confronted with all these rules is an enforcement issue. We don't have a police force. We don't have ways of really enforcing these things. So I guess what I'm looking for are rules that are reasonable and that we can sort of indicate to people our expectations, which I guess is what your main thrust is. And you know, without jumping, I think the only two things here that I'd like to see have to do with the dog issue and the smoking issue. I think if we keep a small number of things, you know, what the rules are in regard to dogs and what the rule is in regard to smoking, and then let everything else sort of take care of itself. At least that's my
I'd be sort of jumping to the end of the story, but that's I think I'm in the same place, and I'm happy to streamline this conversation and jump to a motion that looks more like what you've suggested to cut to the chase here. But
I think there's another
sure.
comment here.
I agree with Councilman Measy. Smoking and following the leash laws in the state are probably the two biggest ones that people are concerned with. And I think because the park has no electricity, that being in the dark will solve itself as how many people will stay in the park at night. So,
Any other general comments? Mayor White?
For the smoking language, I think it's important to ban smoking at events. I don't think we want to ban someone from just sitting on a bench in Humphrey Park and smoking. To me, that seems completely unenforceable. But I think we have had a policy in Humphrey Park for our summer concerts of not allowing smoking. And I think considering the fact that we might have events at Page Park, I think that's also a wise policy. Whatever language we put on the signs, I think it's important to have the same tone on it. When you say, please put your dog on a leash, that's a different message than dogs must be on a leash. And I think when I read through your comments, some of them sort of went back and forth between being overly polite and being more direct. So I think we need to be consistent in what we're saying to people, because please, people could say, well, no, I'm not doing it.
So I think if we end up heading in the direction that it sounds like we may be heading in, I'd be inclined to recommend pictograms over language anyway, right? We're a diverse community of speakers of many languages, and we can kind of get out of the business of how we frame the concept if we use generally accepted pictograms that convey the message without words. It also lends itself to smaller signs, smaller signage footprint. We don't have to put the words. You just put a picture of a dog on a leash with a person putting a bag in the trash, and now you've conveyed, please pick up after your dog, please keep your dog on a leash, without having to worry about translating it or otherwise.
You could have a graphic that explains that too. And I'm sensitive to the parks that are right up to buildings like Willoughby Park regarding the noise, and when the park closes. I don't think we've had a problem, but that is potentially more of an issue than out in Humphrey Park, where it's not right up to a residential building.
Councilman Schaefer?
Yeah, so, first of all, I think Dan did a great job on his memo. It was very thoughtful. He really laid out multiple sides. And I think Mayor White expressed much better than I did what I'm trying to say. I'm not necessarily opposed for signs on the big things, but I think we should set the policies first and then let the signs follow. So, for example, if we're only going to ban smoking at events that are held rarely, maybe we don't need a permanent plaque that says that. So I think we should sort of think about what policies we want. Do we want allow vaping but not smoking? And then maybe that might inform how we prepare these signs and also where we put the signs up. Because some of these parks, one sign would not cover nearly the, would only cover a very small amount of people coming in.
Other thought, Councilmember Stoll?
Excuse me, I agree with almost everything that's been said, but I'd like to piggyback on what Mayor White said about smoking. More of our buildings are becoming non-smoking buildings, and there are people who smoke, so they are going to smoke outside. And I think it's sort of unrealistic to say you can't sit on the park bench and smoke, whether it's cigarettes or people do smoke pot too. I think we need to be realistic. And to be honest with you, the further away people are from other people with the smoke, the probably healthier it is. Not that I'm not, don't get me wrong, I'm not a fan of smoking, but that keeps the smoke further away from people.
Councilmember Easy?
I think I disagree with that, and with Melanie's comment as well. I understand about the smoking, but it seems to me, for example, in Page Park, which is designed in some ways to have kids running around during the day, or people, we have lots of senior citizens using these places. I think we shouldn't be encouraging smoking in those areas for a whole range of reasons. If I want to go into the park and sit down on a bench and somebody's sitting right next to me puffing away on cigarettes, I'm not going to be able to enjoy the park. And I think, as Martha says, many of our buildings are now no smoking. This building is no smoking. We have a general sense in the community that smoking is in these places is not a good idea. And I think think that would be an important limit in the park. And especially, one of the things I fully anticipate is that we'll have people in our current environment using marijuana in the parks, and we're going to have complaints about that as well, because smoking is not just cigarettes and cigars anymore. There's a whole lot of other stuff going on. And so I want to take a firmer stand on that.
Other comments? Yes, Councilmember Tyler, and then R.
I don't mean to be the Betty Boop of this, but I know we have a lot to go through. We'll be here all night if we're just going to go through each one of these. I would refer this back to the committee to bring up. We've got past the biggest thing, which was that signage was voted for. Now, I would think if you guys could get together and bring up, just like we're sitting around talking, we'll be here all night and not move anywhere past this. And I think it would be worth the committee to go back and look at the types of signage and the ideas of, as you said, the pictures. What is it that you really want to focus on, and then come back to have a vote on it? We'll be here. We're not even through this.
Councilmember R.
Well, I'll just observe that one of the challenges with that, at least that I found in trying to accomplish that, is that it presumes some positions that it sounds like maybe we're of multiple minds on. If I'd be happy to table this if members would like to go and sort of organize their thinking, but I do think there are a handful of items, smoking it seems to be one of the more significant, that would lend itself to a discussion among the council members. I could certainly show you what a no smoking pictogram looks like, but if we haven't decided whether smoking in the parks is acceptable or not acceptable, that's not going to be a helpful discussion. And I'm not sure, I would feel uncomfortable leaving that decision to the Parks and Grounds Committee by themselves.
I wonder whether what we might do, since it seems to me that we've had discussion about smoking and discussion about dogs, is express the interest of the council in those two areas and see whether there's a consensus that the signs should address that. And we could, at this meeting, mention that there are other, and vote on that. If you'd like to make a motion on that and see if there's support.
And
Yep.
I'll just make one other observation.
Yeah.
A number of the other items in this memo, I think, are sort of broader policy questions about the usage of Page Park that I think are well handled maybe further down the road when we get closer to the park's opening. Questions about reservations and rentals and open containers in Page Park and a few other items specific to, I think, more likely relevant to the use of Page Park. So I'd be happy to table all the rest of that and just have a conversation
Would you
or
like
come to a
make
resolution.
motion with respect to dogs and tobacco?
I think
Or is
maybe there were
there-
one or two other comments
Yeah,
before.
go ahead.
We've done this before. Can we take a straw vote here on the issue of smoking and on the dogs to provide Dan with some guidance? Because as he says, there's no reason to redraft these things if there's no sense of the council, what the council's position is. So, should we address smoking? Is there, just a yes or no, and then Dan and the committee can figure out how to provide us with an example of how to do that sort of thing. Should we adopt the dog policy that's listed here? If there's no support for that, then we don't have to bother with that.
So what you're proposing is just to have council member R ask whether there's support
Yeah,
for
yeah.
tobacco
Right, without formal voting,
prohibition or
just
smoking
so
prohibition.
he has a sense of what
and
the council
Then do the
is.
same thing for dogs.
And if I may,
Councilman
I'd be happy to do that. And if it seems like that we're of two relatively even minds, I'm happy to present an A and a B, and so people could react more directly to what it might look like. I think, for example, if there's an interest in Page Park, a set of rules for Page Park related to tobacco use, but maybe the Willoughby Park here or Humphrey Park, when there aren't events going on, being available for smokers, or some middle ground that might
So-
resolve the issue.
So let's, yes, Councilmember Salt.
What I tried to express before is I think this talking about the sign is the wrong order. I think we need a policy and a sign to reflect the policy, not decide, oh, we're going to have a sign, now what's our policy? So I would suggest that maybe instead of doing a straw vote or whatever the next step is on what's going to be on a sign is, should we develop a policy on dogs and smoking in our parks?
I think that's what we're, is that what we're
No,
hearing?
I thought it was, are we going, do we have a straw vote to support a sign on smoking and
I don't think so.
dogs? Maybe I misunderstood.
I think it's a topic, Martha, and what that would do then is to provide direction to Dan and perhaps others, Councilmember R and others, to move forward on a question like you're raising. Okay.
So I guess maybe I'll
Take
split
them-
them
take
into
one at a
two.
time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so I think the first would be that, that it is the sense of the council that in all council parks, pet owners are expected to keep their pets on leashes and clean up after them.
Okay, so that's not a motion, you're just looking to see whether there's...
Yeah, I'm happy to do it either way. I mean, that seems like
Then
not,
go
that
ahead.
seems non-controversial, so I'm happy to make that a
Okay,
motion.
So, we don't need a motion. Okay, so let me just see if those council members who are in support of language addressing leashing and cleaning up after dogs, please raise your hand. I see that as everybody's in favor. So Dan, there's clear direction on that. Dan, go ahead.
Absolutely. On the question of smoking, I guess maybe I'll break this into two pieces as well. The general sense of prohibiting smoking in all areas of all village parks. That is to say, no smoking allowed in any of the parks, and no smoking sections in any of the parks. So a blanket prohibition on smoking in all village parks.
So,
Does that include vaping?
All, yeah,
So the
everything,
topic is smoking, vaping.
Right.
everything.
Okay, so the
Lighted
topic
products.
is smoking and
all
vaping.
combustible
Of all
products
combustible
is
products.
basically what
Yeah.
it is.
Perfect.
So let me see, all those who agree with that, please raise your hand. All those opposed? Okay, so you don't need
So-
any further guidance on that?
Nope, I'm happy to provide a few alternatives. That was the most extreme, right? That was the no space, nowhere, no park. I'm happy to provide a couple of alternatives that,
Chairman, was this a straw vote or something
This
that?
is a straw vote.
Okay.
So
Just wanted to get a
direction has
sense
been
of where to go
provided
next.
To both Councilmember R and the Parks and Grounds Committee. Just for the public's interest, other potential areas that could be addressed are open beverages, alcoholic beverages, dismounting from skateboards, bicycles, segways, and other motorized vehicles, and no camping in the park, no open fires or barbecuing. So those are other potential areas that could be addressed at some point and maybe will be taken up by the committee or elsewhere.
and the idea of public rentals or reservations of some of the amenities in the parks.
Yeah, okay. Any further discussion on this item? Then let's move to discussion and vote on the property tax for fiscal year 2026. Village Manager Mansfield.
Yeah, this item was incorrectly listed as the discussion and vote item. The council can certainly choose to discuss the tax rate this evening, but there can't be a vote until there's a public hearing. So the public hearing will be scheduled for April, and then there will be a vote on the tax rate and the budget following the hearing in April. The Finance Committee did support keeping the tax rate at 4 cents per hundred with no change. But again, that can be discussed this evening if you wish, but otherwise it needs to wait for public hearing before a vote.
Is there any interest among council members to have any discussion about that? Seeing none, the village investment policy isn't ripe for discussion or
We don't
conversation.
vote on that now.
We're not either discussing or voting the village property tax. We're not going to discuss or vote on the revision to the village investment policy. We're not going to consider approval of the Red House lease. And that takes us to the appointment of election judges for village council election. Village Manager Mansfield.
As I mentioned in the packet, the council typically appoints 3 judges, and the others are basically designated or appointed by the League of Women Voters as part of their whole election process. And typically the county council representative for us serves as the chief judge. So I did connect with Andrew Friedson, and he is willing to serve in this capacity again. He has a slightly different role than the other judges because he has to come first thing in the morning and inspect and bless the ballot box, and then he comes back at the end of the evening and he certifies the vote count. There are 2 resident judges to be appointed, Bill Corey and Phyllis Meltzer, and they have served in this capacity for several elections in the past, and they are willing to do so again. So the 3 of them would be the village-appointed judges, and then the League of Women Voters will cover the others.
Is there any discussion on this item, Councilman Arden?
I was just going to move for the adoption of the names.
Okay. Okay. It's easy. So there's a motion on the floor to appoint the election judges as listed by the village manager. Councilmember Salt, do you want those repeated for the record, or you got them? Okay. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Would you like to vote?
Mr.
Roll
R?
call.
Yes.
4, Musi. 4, Schaefer.
Yes.
Schaefer, 4, Salt, 4, Tyler.
Yes.
Tyler, 4, White.
Yes.
White, 4, Pestron.
Yes,
Pestron, 4. Thank you.
thank you. That takes us to a discussion vote on proposals for the new initiatives budget and recommendations from the Community Advisory Committee. Let me recognize Ken Niles as the chair of the Community Advisory Committee, and thank you for expeditiously carrying out the task that was assigned by the council to the Community Advisory Committee. The council has in its packet a chart which shows the 5 proposals that were submitted. A File of Life proposal, field trips to various art destinations, movement and dance classes, volunteer training for home visits to persons with memory loss, and end-of-life preparation and related individual sessions. The 2 highest scores were the end-of-life preparation and related individual sessions that received a CAC score of 70 and File of Life at 48. Volunteer training was at 42, movement and dance was at 34, and field trips at 27. So let me see whether there is discussion about how to proceed to approve one or more of these, and then see whether there's a motion to do that. Councilmember Stoll?
I appreciate the work done by the CAC in ranking these. I think since the top-ranked item does not exhaust all the funds allocated to the program, and the second-ranked item is scalable, at the appropriate time, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the end of life and for 1,800 and 2,200, less than requested for the File of Life.
Is there support for that motion?
I think you said it back.
Did I?
Yeah.
Oh, can I repeat? 1,800 for the end of life preparation, the 5th one, and the remaining amount in the budget of 2,200
Right.
for the File of Life, which is the first proposal. That's my motion.
Is there support for that motion? Okay, Councilmember Tyler. So 5 and 1. Is there any discussion? Yes, Councilmember Tyler.
I would highly encourage, and I don't know how you can do this or what's the proper way to write it, is that these programs that come before to work with the program manager of the village to see if there is some synergy between them, and maybe they can work together to do some of these. Even though it's a private initiative, there are a lot of overlaps on things, and I think they should at least touch base with the program manager.
Okay, Councilmember Measy.
On the last one, number 5, that was highly ranked. Somebody inform me what the insurance issues are involved here. Does Ione House, as I look at Ione Senior Services, is it their insurance policy that covers any problems that might arise from these people who are talking to people or visiting with people in case they provide incorrect information, or something goes wrong, and we all know that things can go wrong? Whose insurance policy is active here?
Village Manager Mansfield, do you know the answer to that?
I defer to the Friendship Heights Neighbors Network, who would
The
be
what?
who would be managing this program.
That's the Iona Senior Services. That's not Friendship Heights.
The Iona Senior Services administering the program.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be their
they
it would be their
insurance. So
their coverage. I mean, this would not be.
We're simply contributing money.
Yeah, this would not be at the Village Center. Presumably, it would be conducted by Iona. At
So
their
Mr.
facility.
Measy? I'll just note that I think the proposal you're asking questions about is not one of the 2 proposals in. No, I don't think so. I think it's the next one in your binder. I think is the one we're talking about.
I thought Martha said it was the 5th one in the file.
Oh, yeah, I apologize.
On
It is the Iona
It's
Senior
the-
Services.
Which is, I think, just a speaker. There are two of them, I think, provided by the same vendor, but I think the one we're talking about is just is an education session.
It's conducted by a speaker from Iona, but it's managed and coordinated by FHNN. So it would be insurance questions, I would defer to FHNN.
So let me, it seems to me that File of Life proposal is one that the village can
That's the one that got decided.
manage. Is that your understanding, or?
They could manage it, but I think the proposal was that the proposer would organize going to each building to train people and distribute, and maybe there would be something, maybe like a video created and put on the village website to explain how to fill out the form. That's what I got out of it.
So maybe the sense of the motion could be that for these two that you're recommending, the village manager will talk with the proposers and work out the details and the logistics for each of them. Is that acceptable to you?
Yeah, I'm just writing this down.
Okay.
That's why I suggested that they work with the event program director, because there's still a lot of little nuances that need to be covered. And you hit it. It is FHN who is asking to be funded for this program. And as Measy asked, Councilman Measy asked, the insurance, who covers it? These are questions that need to be cleared out so that we understand exactly who's responsible, who's covered, who's taking the liability. And our program department has done a lot of things and been involved in a lot of events and training and working with the hospitals. I think it still behooves them to talk with the program manager.
So that's why I'm suggesting the village manager, there may be others that need to be talked with to move this forward. So,
Could I just
Councilman
add a
Russell?
comment that won't be actually in the motion, that if the village manager finds out there's something of concern, insurance or something else, then we'll revisit it, but if everything's fine, go forward.
yeah, okay, everybody. So, Mayor White, do you have a question? Oh, sure, go ahead.
Sorry. Is there a way to obtain a copy, for lack of a better word, of the curriculum that is going to be covered under this? My concern is, and I might be the only person in the room who feels this way, but I have a real concern over physician-assisted suicide. I am opposed to it. I think it's legal in D.C. I don't think it's legal yet in Maryland, and I do not think that the village should be sponsoring a program that is recommending that that it even be discussed. That's how strongly I feel about it. And I would like to know what Iona House is going to say to our residents in this regard.
So perhaps still consistent with the motion, that's information that the village manager could obtain if it appears that there's a problem. Village Manager Mansfield?
There is some information about that in the proposal that you have. Information will also be provided as to states accepting out-of-state residents for end-of-life choices. It currently is not legal in Maryland. There's been an attempt in the state legislature for several years to get a bill passed that makes it legal, but it hasn't been adopted. So currently it's not legal in Maryland, but the description in this proposal is that the speaker in this program will provide information as to states accepting out-of-state residents for end-of-life choices.
How would the council like to address that concern of Mayor White? Councilman Tyler and then Councilmember.
I think, and I understand where the mayor is coming from. I agree we should not use county funds to support choices like that if, number one, I think this is where the law will be on our side to not get into the weeds of that, which is it is illegal in the state. So although it sounds like from what you have said, village manager, is that that is part of their training to understand it. But I think it also comes back to Councilman Measy's comment on insurance. The liability, who will take on that liability if one of these trainees discusses end of life with someone? Who will be liable for that? And so I think it is important to understand what is legal, what is lawful in the state when it comes to this particular option, and maybe it is worth a call to Iona to find out exactly how they handle this or how they teach that. And as it was stated, maybe we could see a curriculum or a syllabus to understand what is really covered.
Yes, Councilmember Salt.
In evaluating the proposal and having 100 years ago, slight exaggeration, done some volunteer work at Iona House, I trust the people that run that kind of program to know how to do it. I wouldn't really want to second guess them, so I support having the professionals at Iona House present whatever they normally do.
Other comments? Councilman Orr?
Well, I had some comments unrelated to this, so I'm happy to resolve this question first and then
Okay,
make my
thanks.
comments.
Any other comments on this one? Councilman Measy?
I think between the insurance issue and the important issue that Melanie has raised, I think what I'd like to do is, what I'd like to propose is that we ask village manager to clarify these issues and bring it to us, and we can vote on this project at the April meeting. I'm happy to go ahead with the other proposal, the sticking on the refrigerator one there. Let's do that. Could we do that and then bring the other one back for the April meeting?
Councilmember Salt, you had a motion on the floor supported by Councilmember Tyler. Are you willing to rescind yours and reflect?
I'm just trying to figure out the right procedure here. The concept is fine. I just, so I guess I meant
Just withdraw
Okay,
your original motion
withdraw my original motion and
and
to
instead-
accept the file of life proposal to be funded at $2,200.
That's correct. And to direct further
I'm sorry,
conversation.
and yes, direct the village manager to work out logistics. Is that,
Yep.
okay.
I just to express an opinion on this, that I don't share the same objections about discussion of end-of-life choices. I think that in some circumstances, it is an exceptionally appropriate option for people. I probably feel as strongly about that. I feel strongly about that. So I'm happy to have further discussion about it and to see what happens. But let's vote then on the motion to approve the file of life at 2,200. Any further discussion on that one? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Wait, one thing. So, Ms. Tyler, you accept the amendment. You seconded, is that correct? Okay.
It's not an amendment, actually, the motion
Oh,
is
you're right,
withdrawn.
you're right. So are you seconding the new thing? Yeah. Okay.
And Councilmember Salt, is that your motion? or
Yes, it
Lisa's
is.
motion?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so still Salt and Tyler. Great.
Mhm.
Does everybody understand the motion to approve File of Life, which is at $2,200, and direct the village manager to have some additional conversation and perhaps bring the end-of-life proposal back to the April meeting?
Yes.
That's what we're voting on.
Wait, hold on. Is that in there to bring the end-of-life motion back?
That's what-
I don't think, it's just coming back at the next one with more information, okay?
That's fine.
Okay.
Okay, so on the motion to approve 2,200 for the file of life, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Did you want to call it on?
Mr. R?
Yes.
4, Maisy?
Yes.
4, Schaefer?
4.
Schaefer, 4, Solt, 4, Tyler? 4, White?
Yes.
Wait, 4, Pastrunk?
Yes.
That's 4, thank you.
Motion carries 7-0, confirmed, which takes us to...
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
just before we move off this agenda item,
Yep.
just a couple of observations.
yes.
First off, I think, regardless of anyone's position on the underlying issue, I think it sets a good precedent for us to interrogate some of the programs that we're putting village resources against. So strongly support getting some more information here. I just want to observe that I think that's good practice for us. 2 other observations. One, I think this was for a first time out, it was nice to see the responses to this inquiry. I do think one lesson that I took away here is that I think in future years, if this program continues, I think we want to do a better job of reaching out to the community. I note that the majority of these proposals really serve a smaller percentage of the residents in the community. So I think, if we've got more money available in the future, getting out to some of the other constituent groups, new parents or whatever, I think would be helpful to just see a diversity of proposals here if we had the opportunity to make people aware of the opportunity. And then finally, I'll just observe that while I'm supportive of these 2 activities, I'm not sure, I don't necessarily think that we need to set the precedent that every year we set a dollar value and that we have to spend every nickel of that amount. If the proposals warrant it, great. If not, I don't think we need to go out looking for opportunities to spend more money here. So while I'm fine spending the full amount this year on these 2 programs, I think that's something we should keep in mind in future years.
Any further discussion? I'll just make one comment that for the proposals that weren't funded, it seems reasonable to me that those proposers could come and talk with the village about those, and maybe the village program staff is able to make those part of regular offerings from the village, and some of them, as I read the proposals, already are. So potentially not for all of them, but that's an option that to the extent that the proposers are listening, and could contact the village manager about it. Okay. The radar sign is taken off the agenda. We're on to the discussion vote on the EV charging stations. Councilmember Solt?
Thank you. So I serve as the liaison to the Climate Change and Environment Committee, and the committee is proposing that the village allocate funds into the capital budget, and I'll detail the proposal a little bit later in my discussion, for 2 level 2 charging stations as an amenity for use by village residents to help reduce carbon emissions and to help our residents who want to move to electric vehicles. The cost breakdowns are in the notebook. The committee determined that this was a community need based on an informal assessment. There's no formal survey or official metric. I don't think anybody at this point knows how many electric vehicles are owned by residents in the village. But the need for charging stations is expected to rise because, for at least one reason, which is there is now an executive order coming from the president's office to remove electric charging stations that were installed by the federal government. So they are being ripped out as we speak. And I know, I used to park at a federal facility, and there were charging stations in those garages. So I gather that's going on right now, which I won't comment on it beyond how ridiculous it is. So currently, there are no public parking lots in the village with EV chargers. There are not really any public parking lots at all. Only some buildings here, residential buildings, can and do accommodate EV chargers. And there is no external funding source because of our quirky status as an unincorporated taxing district. If we were a municipality, did I say it right?
No, special tax.
I'm sorry.
We
I
are
mangled
incorporated.
that.
Yeah.
Just say our quirky categorization. If we were a municipality, there would be funding sources, but, you know, we are where we are. So these are not difficult to install. People have done them all over the place. The biggest outstanding question that I think sort of the elephant in the living room is, where would they go? So they would need to be on village-owned or controlled property or streets. So I'm just going to give some general categories of options. They could be next to the existing parking spaces on the street. Like, that's what they do in DC, just a regular street. They put them, you know, almost instead of parking meters. They could be next to newly created spaces. We have some spaces that say no parking. We could choose to make those for charging stations. One option is the center's outside parking area. And another option, and this all depends on what happens with the Red House lease, if that's actually signed. It's an option there. That is a village-owned parking lot, and there could be charging stations placed there. So this obviously involves some further exploration. One of the key pieces of information is sort of how close to the proper electrical source a location is. So I'd like to move to allocate $25,000 to the capital budget for the purchase and installation of 2 level 2 charging stations. Direct the village manager to work with the climate change committee to identify optimal locations on village-owned or controlled property, and bring the final proposal back to the council for approval once all that's worked out. It's 25,000 total.
It's been a motion. Is there support for that motion? Okay, thank you. Moved by Councilmember Salt, supported by Councilmember Measy, to allocate $25,000 to the capital budget for 2026 for 2 level 2 chargers, and to direct the village manager to work with the Climate Change and Environment Committee on all the details associated with doing this, back to council at some point in the future. Councilman Measy?
A couple of questions. First, would the assumption be that the person using these charging stations would not be charged? There would not be a fee. So many of these charging stations, you have to pay something to do that, no?
I would call that an open question. The amount of electricity that's used is so minimal. Some people think it's, you know, not worth the trouble of associating with a vendor that's collecting the payments and so forth. But that's an open question. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but it's envisioned that this would be available for village residents only.
Well,
I'm sorry if I jumped to your question.
That
there.
was my second question. I don't think you can make it. I mean, first of all, there's an enforcement issue. I mean, how would you know?
I can explain that, but
Secondly, you know, whether you can actually legally do it is another question.
okay. I'm sorry.
I wonder whether these are the kinds of questions that could be discussed and answers subsequently brought forward to the council at a later date with the recommendation about one thing or the other, because
Happy to, you know.
yeah, but the council member Tyler.
I I commend you all trying to go forward on this, and as I shared in the Budget Committee, I've been down this road personally with the last residence where I resided, and you are correct in saying, and not that is to say you're right or wrong, but I agree with you. The president is removing and has removed by executive order all the benefits that have been going with the EV stations around the country now. It's great if you can ever find how to do this for $25,000. And I say that because I have questions on the vendors when, let's say hypothetically, you want to put it on the street here. We've got to have the lineage, the power supply to be able to connect to somewhere. And also, as Councilman Measy stated, how do you connect, how do you charge people if it's just for the residents? You can do it just for your residents because it is on village property. If you go on there is an app that you can look for to find public EV stations in this community, and they list Geico. Geico has two chargers there. They list Geico as a public. It's not. You got to have a card, and you have to have the code to use it. But on the app, it does show it as a public place. So you can control it. It is a lot of money outlaid in the beginning. You have to have the network. So that means you're going to have to tap off the network that we have here. May not sound like a lot of money, but after a while all those fees do add up. There's a maintenance fee when you do get them installed. It's interesting to see you chose the level 2 because the superchargers, which most people like, they cost the most, but people end up charging in less time. So I have a lot of questions. I know you've done some work on it, and I'll be more than happy to send the questions to you, but I think this can go back to the committee to get some more information because there are 2 buildings I know that have EV chargers in them right now, and I know the Willard is planning to put EV in theirs. People plug into the 110 outlet in the walls where they see them. Have you done a demographic to see the growth that's anticipated with electrical cars coming here as opposed to what is out here now, which they're making this area more and more reliable on Metro and not cars? So I can send these questions to you because, again, this will be all night. But I think it's great, but the infrastructure is a very expensive upfront outlay cost. In the end, yeah, it might end up being just $25,000, but getting it started, it's more.
Councilman Rard, did you have a comment?
Maybe an observation. So I agree. I think there are some questions that need to be answered. However, with Councilwoman Salt just serving as a liaison to the committee, I just wonder, as a process matter, to whom we're going to refer these questions. I don't know if the ad hoc committee is in a position to develop the proposal out more at our direction, or if we need to think about reorienting this question to some combination of council members or some alternative approach. I don't have an answer. It's a legitimate question. I'm not presupposing an answer, but it just seems like a non-traditional the questions we refer back to Parks and Grounds or Public Safety. That makes sense to me. But how we refer this back to the ad hoc committee and put Ms. Salt in charge, or put her on the hook as just our liaison to that committee, might be complicated.
Yes, Mayor White?
Just to add on to what Cheryl said about locations of charging stations, when you walk through the garage of the building underneath it, that's technically not Friendship Heights, but there are a couple of juice bars there, and I've never seen a car plugged into them.
I can tell you why, because they don't work.
They don't work.
They've been dead In fact, the juice company is out of business.
That's a good reason
Yeah.
to not plug in.
Yeah.
And there's no other ones in that garage?
But remember, you have to pay to park, okay?
Yeah.
So you're paying the parking fee just to basically charge your car, potentially. There are two, people probably see this at Amazon Fresh. There are two charging stations out there, open to the public. There's no, you don't have to connect with any network, just plug it in and it's free to you immediately. For quite a long time, only one of those worked, but now they're both working again. So, what's that building called? The medical building at Hills Plaza in Willard, they have two charging stations that work, but again, you have to pay what I would view as exorbitant parking fees just to be able to use the rechargers. So I don't call that necessarily a public parking lot. In the, for lack of a better term, Whole Foods parking lot is where these juice, whatever the company is called,
So
places.
think that
So
the-
I know there are lots of
Yeah.
questions. I'm happy to try to answer them, but as you said, maybe not here,
what I'm
but
going to suggest is, I think the intent in bringing it to the council was to approve a certain amount, in this case $25,000, to place it in the capital improvement budget so the money is there once all these details are worked out. And I think that it might behoove perhaps you, Councilmember Salt initially, and the village manager to talk to their probably licensing, permit, all kinds of other issues at some level. Either the village manager or assistant village manager are going to have to be involved in the conversation. So maybe we could just approve the allocation of money into the capital budget for 2026, if that's the council's the pleasure, and then informally some of these other details could begin to be worked out. And they don't have to, they can be worked out throughout 2026 because the money will be there for this, as you've recommended.
could I just respond to just a
Sure.
couple of the comments? The estimated cost does include, there's a pretty big range on this thing called trenching, which is, kind of like digging. If you have to, it takes more distance to get to the electrical supply. So that's already embedded in the cost estimate, as is the permitting fees. And I'm happy to answer, work to get questions answered about the implementation of this. But so a positive vote on this would mean basically a go-ahead
That's
to
basically
continue
what
with
I'm-
this.
what I'm
Okay,
suggesting. Yeah, Councilman Easy.
Yeah, I also assume that given the price, we'd have to do bidding on this. We have to put this out for bids because there are different providers here as well. So I agree with the thrust that we should put the money, we should vote to put the money into the capital improvements budget, and then ask the committee, working with the staff particularly, to get the details ironed out, then bring it back to us.
With the formal proposal. Okay. And so that, I don't know, Councilmember Salt, whether that's acceptable to you as the motion? Okay, and okay, and Councilman Measy, you're still supporting that. Is there any further question? Yes, Councilmember Tyler.
I think I agree with everything you said, but I also think that we should not forget what Councilmember Ayer just said. This is an ad hoc committee, and it does not have a chair. It will dissolve at the end of the year, so everything can work through the village manager, I would say, going forward.
Let me ask the village manager about that. Village Manager Mansfield?
What's the question?
The question is, it's unlikely, we don't know whether there's going to be an ad hoc committee on climate change and environment in the subsequent council. The current one dissolves. That maybe more realistic is to have you front the process to discover what the details would need to be. And by you, I don't mean you necessarily. It could be a member of staff to front the process of figuring out what the details need to be, and then it would likely sometime in 2026.
Yeah,
I'm not
I
talking
mean,
about
I would,
committee.
yeah, I was going to point out that the committee has a shelf life as
So
well.
I'm just suggesting that
That
maybe
the
it should be
committee-
referred to the
committee
village
technically
manager and-
dissolves at the end of
Yeah.
the council term, so it could be, the committee could be reappointed by the council or a new committee established.
Okay. So the motion now is to put, as I understand it, is to put $25,000 in the capital improvement budget for 2026 and refer the details of making this happen to the extent it can to the village manager, working with other council members.
I would like to have in the motion for 2 level 2 charging stations, okay?
You don't think you may discover that you need something else, or you're okay with that?
Well, it's implementation of that, but, I mean, I don't know, just 25K in the capital budget, for what? We need to say
I'd
for what?
suggest, just, this is my recommendation,
Okay.
not limit yourself. You may
Okay.
find out more information.
So, for EV charging
for EV
stations,
char-
okay,
for
there we go.
2 EV charging
For-
stations.
There we go,
Okay. Does everybody understand the motion made by Councilmember Salt, supported by Councilmember Measy, to place $25,000 in the capital improvement budget for 2026 and direct the village manager to work with any council members that may be interested to discover the details and bring a proposal forward to the council at a later date. Further discussion? None. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Want to call the roll?
Yes, please. Mr. R.,
Yes.
for Measy, for Schaefer,
Yes.
for Salt, for Tyler, for White,
Yes.
for Pestron,
Yes.
for, and I would just say, if anyone has questions, just send me an email. Thank you.
Maybe they should be directed, best to direct them to you and the village manager, since he's got the responsibility to carry it out. That brings us to a discussion vote on the Personnel Committee recommendations for staff salary, general increase, and change to benefit eligibility requirements. Mayor White?
The Personnel Committee met last month, and one of the recommendations that it made for staff salary adjustments was a 3.5% increase across the board. We had a 4% placeholder in the budget, but the committee voted to have a 3.5% increase, and Councilmember Salt objected, and she was recommending a smaller increase of 2.75. Is that what you? 2.7. Okay. So I think we want to have 2 separate motions on this agenda item here. So I would move that we increase all staff salaries by 3.5%.
A motion to increase all staff salaries by 3.5%.
Yes.
Made by Mayor White and supported by Councilman Measy. Is there discussion?
Can we clarify effective when or for what fiscal year?
7/1.
Starting in the
Yeah.
next fiscal
Okay.
year.
July 1st.
July 1st. Everybody understand the motion? Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Want to call the roll?
Yes. Mr. R.,
Yes.
for Measy,
Yes.
for Schaefer,
Yes.
for Salt, for Tyler, for White,
Yes.
for Pestron,
Yes.
for. Thank you.
Mayor White?
The next item is a change to the benefit eligibility requirements. We had discussed the assistant program director's position, and we made a recommendation to make that position 30 hours per week with benefits. And Councilmember Salt made a recommendation that going forward, no staff member would be eligible for benefits unless they worked an average of 30 hours per week. And during the committee meeting, we did not think that would affect any current staff members, but it does affect one. So I'd like to make the recommendation that this be for new hires and not for current staff members, because we would not want to take away any benefits from a current staff member. So I would make that as a recommendation, as a motion, I'm sorry, that going forward, new hires must work an average of 30 hours per week in order to be eligible for benefits.
Is there discussion?
Well, legally,
Let me see whether there's support for the motion. Is there support for the motion?
Second.
Okay. Council Arnese, thank you. Go ahead.
so I'm
Councilman
not sure, and there may be a legal definition, how you define average. Is it, I simply don't know, but if you work 5 hours and then 55, or do you have to work some minimum, or is it every 6 months?
That was language that Council Member Salt had in her proposal.
I think it's fine. It's a common usage of
Okay.
language, I think.
Any further discussion? Go ahead, Julie.
I was just going to say it's typically applied to per pay period. So in a 2-week pay period, you could have, say, less than 25 and then more than 25 and average 25. I think that's typically how it's done.
Councilmember Salt.
I'd just like to clarify, at no point were we ever considering taking something away from current employees. It was always on a going forward basis for new employees. And this is consistent with Obamacare, and it's consistent with most of the employers out in the world around us.
So, any further discussion? Councilmember-
Could we amend the motion to include the language that the village manager suggested? So to modify average with per pay period?
Yep.
Okay.
Would that be 60 hours per pay period then? That's 30 hours a week.
It's
30 hours a week per pay period. An average.
Oh, average of 30 hours per week per pay period. So we're inserting per pay period. Is that correct?
That's right.
Sure.
My understanding is that that would work out then. To be eligible for benefits, every pay period you have to work an average of 30 hours a week.
Understood. Fine.
So there's any further discussion? Councilmember Schaefer?
I'm just thinking, do we want maybe new employees to sign something acknowledging that? The status?
What's the question?
If there's some form that new employees just sign, I understand this is not a benefits position, or it is.
I would assume we have some kind of agreement.
Do we have new employees sign anything?
We don't know. We don't have employment contracts.
Right.
There's
Well, I didn't say
there's
contract.
No staff person has a contract.
I didn't say contract, some sort of acknowledgement about
Well,
eligibility for benefits.
Acknowledgement for what?
Councilmember Tyler?
If you have a job description announced, it says, it should say whether benefits are in it or not. That's it.
So, yeah, Councilmember Orr and then Councilmember Salt.
I guess that raises actually a good question. I presume we are making a determination at the point of hiring that the position requires that the incumbent work an average of 30 hours a week per pay period. It's a part-time job or a full-time job, with full-time being designated at 30 hours an average. So we are not leaving it. Is it our expectation that we are not leaving it to the employee and the immediate supervisor to assign hours based on one thing or another, but we are making the determination prior to onboarding a new employee that the position qualifies, the position requires 30 hours a week of work. So we're not really tying it to what the employee does. We are making a policy determination that positions requiring an average of 30 hours a week are eligible for benefits, not employees working 30 hours a week. Right? Is that, yeah? Okay.
Councilmember Salt?
My understanding, it's not at the point of hiring, but it's at the point of posting the position.
Right.
Right.
That's
So
it.
it should be very clear when you announce we're seeking applicants for such and such position. It would say it there, and be clear about benefit eligibility. But I would also suggest a lot of these other details maybe we can address outside of a council meeting.
I think that was Councilmember Tyler's point, just listed in the job description, and then it's right there. So, any further discussion? If none, then there was a motion by Mayor White, supported by Councilmember Measy, to establish eligibility requirements going forward for new hires of full benefits if they are working an average of 30 hours per week per pay period.
Could I read what I have, and
Yeah,
then we'll
sure.
make sure that new hires, the motion is that new hires work an average of 30 hours per week per pay period for benefit eligibility. Is that
Full
We
time-
pay some benefits.
Yeah.
for
Full-time
full-time benefit eligibility?
In light of all this, I wonder if we might want to revisit the language and suggest that instead of the language that speaks to new hires working 30 hours, we say something to the effect that positions requiring an average of 30 hours a week shall be considered full-time for benefit purposes. Tie it to the position rather than the employee and the employee's work, and that may streamline the proposal.
But we've got to be clear, this is for new employees only.
Prospectively, yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Would you mind repeating that language? Mhm.
I think it was the positions posted for new employees working 30 hours per week will be entitled to full benefits.
Right, 30 or more hours a week. Correct.
Everybody understand what we're voting on here? Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. The motion carries. Secretary Stoll?
Mr. R?
Yes.
4, Measy?
Yes.
4, Schaefer?
4.
Schaefer, 4, Sold, 4, Tyler? Tyler, 4, White?
Yes.
White, 4, Pestrom?
Yeah.
Pestrom, 4. Thank you.
Motion carries 7-0. Takes us to the last item on the agenda, which is discussion of approving an additional $250,000 from the Donahoe payment into the capital improvement budget.
Yeah, I think we can do this very quickly. We've taken this vote twice before, the first time to fund the capital account, the second time to commit additional funds. Both of those votes passed unanimously. Again, not part of the budget vote, which is why there's no requirement to hold a public hearing or announce it in advance. We are projecting to spend, I think, over $1 million through this year and the next 3 years, so there is a need to continue to fund it either through a transfer like this or an annual transfer. The Finance Committee voted unanimously 3-0 to approve this recommendation, to recommend this to the council for approval. And did you want to use your motion, or shall
No,
I'll
I
make
just
one?
would correct some of what you said, which is that the committee has not yet voted to refer it to the council. And given all the conversation about that we will have a capital improvement budget and we'll have an operating budget for which you, and frankly I, am a strong proponent. This is a budget that we will be approving at the next Finance Committee meeting, and we should leave the final recommendation to come out of the Finance Committee for the April meeting.
Well, as I said, first of all, I think the referral is implied because we voted on it. It was unanimous, and again, it is not a budget vote. We've done this twice before. It was never tied to a budget vote, and it's a mistake to do that now, and it makes more sense to dispose of that, and then that would inform the budget. It's not, we can have a budget with or without this vote. We could have this vote with or without a budget.
Okay,
So
I'll-
there's no point in linking it.
I'll take my second opportunity to make an additional comment that's allowed, and then we can, if there's a motion, we can put it up for a vote. which is that I have been chastised publicly and privately for making assumptions and assuming that something is implied by something that's been done. And so I find it somewhat ironic that at this point you are basing your recommendation on what would be an inference that we should take or an implication that you think has been made. So we both had an opportunity twice to say we have. Let's see if there's a motion.
It's the procedure we followed for any recommendation out of a committee. I mean, could you name something that a committee unanimously voted for that wasn't taken up by the council?
My point on this.
Your point is not relevant, quite frankly.
Well, I appreciate your point of view. I think that the expression of that point of view is frankly, culturally unacceptable in a meeting like this. And I'd say if you'd like to make a motion and see whether there's support, and then we can take a vote on it, since that's what I understood you wanted to do at the beginning of the meeting, let's do that. And rather than casting aspersions on other council members. Yeah, so
Well,
make a
it was,
motion.
it
So
was a
make your
fight to
motion,
get
Ron.
this on the agenda.
So
My
make a-
motion is to commit an additional $250,000 from the Donahoe air rights payment to the capital account upon receipt.
Is there support for that motion? Okay, support by Measy. Everybody understand the
I'm
motion?
very sorry. I just want to repeat the motion so I get it right.
Yeah.
To commit an additional $250,000 from the Donahue,
Donahoe.
Donahoe, what's the
Air
word?
rights.
Air rights? Okay.
Payment to the capital account.
Payment to the capital account. Thank you. Sorry for the delay. Mhm.
And yes, Councilman Measy.
We open to discussion now?
Yes, we're open for discussion.
I want to provide a context for this decision. The treasurer has, for the last year, been urging us to fund the capital improvements account. And last when we did the budget for the current fiscal year, Roy had $25,000 in the budget. We decided to remove that $25,000 to transfer from the operating budget to the capital improvements fund. This year, he proposed a $75,000 transfer from the operating fund. I thought it was 75, whatever, 10,000 here, 10,000 there, to the operating budget. My view in making the motion that we take $250,000 from the $1 million that's coming is that this transfer would be in lieu of having to starve the operating budget of money over the next 3 years or so. Now, obviously, we can't bind the budget that will be developed by the next council and the next council after that. But it seems to me that with the money in the capital improvements budget, there will not be the pressure to fund the capital improvements budget from the operating budget and current revenues that are coming in. And again, to emphasize the point, the capital improvements budget is not legally sequestered. If for some reason we confronted a huge operating problem, which I don't expect that we will, we can move money out of the capital improvements budget into the operating budget. That's at least the way we are currently operating. So that's why I think it's an idea. Now, whether it's a good idea, and that's why the Finance Committee voted to do that. Now, whether it should be done now or afterwards, I'm not sure there is any harm in doing it now. If you want to lock in that decision at this point, I'm happy to do that.
Yes, Councilman.
Question for clarity. Again, I heard you say a second 250,000. Where's the first 250,000?
No, the council already committed $500,000 from those receipts. This is an additional $250,000 from that $1 million payment. There was a prior vote, council vote, which was very unremarkably done and unanimous.
So the total
that.
amount going into capital then is what?
750,000.
750 with this additional 250.
I think it would be better to be very clear and transparent in saying the total amount that's going to be there and not have people think it's 250,000.
Any further discussion on this? Councilmember Salt?
Just a minor point. I think the words committing an additional 250,000, that's our action now, the 250K. I think it muddies it, bringing up a motion that, a decision that happened quite a while ago. And also, I agree with Councilmember Measy. If we can do something that will relieve pressures on an operating budget going forward, when we, at least initial signs are seeing a lot of stress on tax revenue in our state and in our county, that's probably a good thing to do. So, another reason I support this.
Any further discussion? The motion is to approve another additional $250,000 from the Donahoe air rights payment into the capital improvement budget for 2026. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign? No. Motion carries. Roll.
Mr. R?
Yes.
For Measy?
Yes.
For Schaefer?
Yes.
For Salt? For Tyler? For White?
Yes.
For Pestrunk?
No.
Pestrunk
Motion carries.
against. Okay.
Is there a motion to adjourn? All those in favor, aye. Aye. Our meeting is adjourned at 9.